Chosen one. Hey family, welcome back, powerful souls. Let's get one thing straight right from the start. You're not ordinary, and you were never meant to be. If you're here right now, it's not by accident. It's because you carry something this world can't duplicate. That light you've got. It doesn't come from trends, followers, or approval. It comes from alignment, from surviving storms that would have wiped out anyone else. You're not here to fit in. You're here to shift atmospheres. Let them underestimate you. Let them write their little stories, with you as the underdog. Because the plot twist? It's coming. You are the type of person who rises in silence and suddenly changes everything. You don't need permission. You don't need applause. And the people who once doubted you, they feel it now. Oh yes, they feel it. That tension they can't explain when your name comes up, that's the energy of someone they thought was finished, becoming unstoppable. This space, right here, is for the ones who were overlooked, dismissed, doubted, and still chose to heal, grow, and glow. So, if you've ever wondered why you've been through so much, why your journey feels heavier than most, listen up. It's because you were built to carry impact. The kind that shifts people without ever having to say a word. By the end of this message, you're not going to shrink anymore. You're not going to apologize for your presence, your power, or your purpose. You're going to stand up and say with your chest, "There's no one like me." And that's not arrogance, that's truth. So take a deep breath. Get ready. Because what's coming next is not just confirmation, it's activation. Let's go. Looking for purpose and peace? Hit subscribe and start the journey. Some truths echo in silence, growing louder when no one's watching. That kind of weight doesn't come from accusations or confrontations. It grows from within, where excuses can't hide and noise can't distract. It's not about loud justice or open revenge. It's the quiet impact of being treated unfairly despite offering nothing but sincerity. The damage wasn't shouted, but felt deeply, unshakably, by the one who caused it. There's something disarming about a person who gives without conditions, who remains present without schemes, who believes in connection even when treated like an option. The aftermath of hurting someone like that doesn't vanish with time. It lingers, not because of external reminders, but because of internal reckoning. The guilt isn't born from confusion. It stems from the clarity that there was no ambiguity in what they received. The pain they caused wasn't accidental. It was witnessed by their own conscience in real time. In moments of solitude, flashes return, not of fights or drama, but of quiet decency, of someone who offered softness in the face of indifference. That memory doesn't fade. It becomes a mirror. And with every moment the one they hurt continues to grow, without bitterness, without collapse. It burns deeper, not because they were forgotten, but because they realized they lost a presence that made them confront who they truly were when no one was watching. It's not just remorse. It's a reckoning, a relentless recognition of what was lost, not a trophy, not a role, but a soul that carried light. And now, that light thrives elsewhere. Unreachable, make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. Some people leave ripples, others leave frequencies, and those frequencies rewrite the room before a word is spoken. It isn't an appearance or attitude. It's something intangible, a resonance that can't be borrowed, bottled, or rehearsed. It hums beneath the surface and reveals everything that's been carefully hidden. That signal doesn't ask for attention. It disrupts simply by existing. And the moment it's felt, every imitation falters. Most move through life in masks, expressions rehearsed, strength staged, peace performed. But when an authentic presence brushes against all that fiction, it creates static. It shakes the carefully built illusions loose, not by confrontation, but by contrast. There's no script that can prepare them for a soul that doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't compete, because that kind of power doesn't come from pretending. It comes from surviving the kind of storms no one claps for. That's why onlookers grow curious, confused, and often uncomfortable. They can't decode what makes it different, but they know it is. They label it to feel safer, call it strange, intense, or just luck. But none of those words explain how the world seems to move in your favor while they remain stuck trying to manipulate their way forward. They sense something ancient in it, something earned, not inherited. And that's what unnerves them most. What they overlook is that this current was sculpted in solitude, refined through betrayal, silence, and internal collapse. It isn't a performance. It's the product of surviving what should have broken you. That's why it magnetizes what's real and repels what isn't. It doesn't adjust to fit in, it stands firm, and anything that can't harmonize with it eventually falls away. That separation isn't personal, it's vibrational. The higher the signal rises, the louder the distortion of the false becomes. And those left behind can't unfeel what they once tried to ignore. There are those who haunt, not with their absence, but by becoming the proof of what was lost through fear. It's not the memories that hurt, it's the aftermath of the decision. Not just losing a person, but losing what that person represented. A mirror into what life could have become if they'd been willing to step beyond the comfortable. They didn't just walk away. They chose stillness over transformation, and now they sit with the echo of that choice. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. Each milestone achieved, each quiet win witnessed from afar, reopens what they thought had healed. And it cuts not because of nostalgia, but because of recognition. They didn't rise, they remained. They aren't surrounded by what inspires growth, but by what confirms their fears. They traded elevation for familiarity, depth for repetition, and the contrast is unbearable. They narrate alternate versions of the story, claiming detachment, pretending the loss was mutual. But the comparison haunts them. The ones they chose don't challenge them, don't inspire them, don't reveal anything except how far they've stopped themselves from expanding. And now, the one they once dismissed stands as a quiet testament to what readiness could have built. They reminisce not because they miss a person, but because they understand too late that what they rejected was never excessive, only ahead of its time. The ache comes from knowing they mistook evolution for threat. And now, that misunderstanding trails them like a shadow, one they can't outrun, silence, or forget. Not because they weren't warned, but because they always knew. Some spirits are unforgettable not because they try to be, but because they awaken something that can't be silenced. No matter how many profiles are blocked, messages deleted, or memories buried under distractions, there are energies that leave fingerprints far deeper than visibility. This wasn't an interaction, it was a shift. And no matter how many times it's pushed aside, it returns, echoing in quiet moments like a truth that refuses to fade. It was never a brief moment in their timeline. It was the pulse of something real that stretched across their entire sense of meaning. Every other interaction now feels artificial, rehearsed, or shallow in comparison. Laughter feels empty. Words feel rehearsed. There's a contrast they can't unsee, and it keeps highlighting how real things once felt. What was shared wasn't just affection, it was reflection. What they lost wasn't a companion. It was the clarity of who they could have become. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. The irony is in how intensely they tried to pretend it didn't matter. How many facades were worn just to keep from revealing how much space that memory still takes up. But reminders don't always come in the form of photographs. They arrive in songs, in strangers' voices, in situations that play out almost identically. These echoes don't ask for permission. They show up and reveal that forgetting has always been a performance. Even as growth and healing move forward elsewhere, they remain anchored to a version of the past they never fully processed. It's not envy, it's exposure. It's that inner knowing that something rare was mishandled, and now it thrives where their access is no longer valid. What haunts them isn't just the glow. They're haunted by their inability to recreate what was once available and free. It's not about nostalgia. It's about the collision of truth and loss. Some presences do more than just challenge perception. They disrupt it entirely. There are those who, simply by existing, unsettle everything built on appearance, performance, or borrowed beliefs. Their authenticity doesn't shout, it simply is. And that silent certainty confronts anything rooted in illusion. Without ever trying to, it dismantles pretenders. Many speak of insight and clarity until they meet someone who walks in it. Suddenly, the quotes fade and the masks fall, because real alignment doesn't echo religion, it embodies awareness. No explanation necessary. No need to justify the harmony, the intuition, the inexplicable way life seems to respond with precision. What others call coincidence, they live as confirmation. It stings not because of arrogance, but because of accuracy. Because for those who live behind crafted personas, genuine presence becomes a spotlight, not a mirror. They recoil, not from judgment, but from recognition. They see someone thriving not because of manipulation, but because of alignment. And that's the difference, presence over pretense. The discomfort isn't about dislike. It's about confrontation with what's missing in themselves. So instead of asking how to rise, they point fingers. Instead of stepping into growth, they attempt to drag the light down. But truth doesn't dim under pressure. It stands quietly, revealing the gap between who people pretend to be and who they actually are. That kind of revelation isn't always welcome, but it's unforgettable. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. Some people only feel tall when others are on the ground, and your struggles once gave them a ladder they didn't build. In your quieter seasons, when the light dimmed and the doors were slow to open, they celebrated in silence. Every stumble you made became their twisted comfort. Every delay in your path gave them the illusion of momentum. Not because they were thriving, but because your stillness made their mediocrity look like success. Their laughter wasn't joy. It was relief that you hadn't yet arrived. But tides shift, and now the tremble in their tone says everything. They watch in secret, hiding behind muted profiles and half-hearted shade, hoping the momentum you found is temporary. What unsettles them isn't just your rise. It's the fact that you're rising on your own terms. You're building from the ground with blueprints no one else can duplicate. You're moving without noise, without vengeance, and that stillness is deafening. They can't recreate what's unfolding, and they know it. There's no outburst, no revenge monologue, just the steady blooming of someone they once overlooked. That grace burns more than any insult ever could. They expected resistance, not peace. They anticipated competition, not evolution. Now every accomplishment of yours drags their insecurities into daylight. They weren't prepared for your name to echo in circles they never thought you'd enter, especially from lips they were trying to impress themselves. What unsettles them most isn't your gain. It's their exposure. Their fake applause, their mocking comments, their subtle digs, they're all coming back. Not by your hand, but through the quiet confirmation that you never needed their acceptance to win. They see your momentum as a threat, not because it's fast, but because it's rooted. And rooted things grow in ways no one can undo. In places filled with noise, the rarest energy is silence. Not the silence of fear or passivity, but the kind that holds presence without performance. There are people who spend every room trying to be noticed, and then there's the one who walks in with no agenda and somehow shifts the air. Not by doing the most, but by simply not needing to. That calm draws eyes, not out of admiration, but because it interrupts the chaos. That kind of balance isn't loud. It doesn't come from forced confidence or borrowed charm. It's forged through self-awareness, not applause. And that's what rattled the space. While others rehearsed stories and titles, the quiet one brought clarity. No flex, no force, just unshakable ease. That mirror revealed what the noise tried to hide. That performance can't compete with presence. What triggered discomfort wasn't arrogance, it was depth. The room didn't know how to hold someone who didn't ask for validation, yet still received it. That simplicity made the performances around it feel excessive. People weren't threatened by what was said, but by what wasn't, because even silence became a statement. Even without effort, the impact lingered. Long after the door closed, comparisons began. Not because someone demanded attention, but because the contrast left a mark. A stillness that couldn't be faked, a presence that couldn't be imitated. They were too busy acting out a script to realize authenticity had already stolen the scene. And now, all they're left with is the memory of what it felt like to stand beside something real, and the realization that they missed their cue entirely. Some lights are forged in the ashes. Your brilliance wasn't gifted. It was carved through trials few even knew you faced. What they admire now didn't bloom in peace. It was sculpted in silence, where support was scarce and pain came loud. The resilience they envy came from seasons where your only allies were your own will and something sacred beyond understanding. They praised the outcome, but avoid the memory of how they laughed at your lack, contributed to your collapse, or ignored your cry. They didn't expect you to rebuild, let alone rise. They thought the weight would crush you, but instead, you became anchored, untouchable. Not because you were spared, but because you walked through every flame and refused to become what tried to destroy you. The shade they threw became soil, the rejection became redirection, and every wound turned into warning signs only the wise can read. Now you move differently, not harder, but deeper. You see through things. You don't flinch. You don't fold. Attempts to provoke you bounce off the walls of who you've become. They don't rattle you anymore because the version of you they used to manipulate no longer exists. You've become too seasoned for their antics, too aligned to be pulled back into disorder. They called your silence weakness, but it was the sound of you rising. They thought indifference meant defeat, not knowing it was your rebirth in motion. What unsettles them now isn't just your strength, but the glow of someone who didn't become bitter. They became built. There's an air around you that can't be diluted, a force that doesn't scream but demands space. That's not ego. That's what integrity feels like when it's unshakable. And they feel it when you walk in. They sense that they lost access to something they didn't understand, and now they can't touch you. Not because you're hidden, but because your spirit simply won't grant them entry anymore. Some hearts show up not to fix, but to remind others of what love could look like if it weren't driven by fear. There are people who didn't need to be needed. They simply chose to give from a place of fullness. And that kind of affection is rare. It's not performative, not controlling. It's generous without being desperate. And that's what caught them off guard. They didn't know how to receive care that didn't demand anything in return. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. You weren't proving anything. You were just present, whole, intentional, not chasing love, but offering it because it overflowed. They weren't ready. Not for honesty without manipulation. Not for attention that didn't come with possession. Not for a connection that didn't seek to control but to nurture. So instead of rising to meet it, they doubted it. They tested it. They tried to diminish what they couldn't match. They gambled with something sacred, assuming it would wait forever. They underestimated the finality of a heart that gives with clarity. And now, in the quiet aftermath, they replay it all. Their indifference, their resistance, their fear disguised as pride. They remember how they mocked what they couldn't comprehend. And now that memory weighs more than the absence. Not because you were loud, but because your silence carries more truth than their words ever did. They see pieces of what you offered in others, but it never fits the same. They hear echoes, but the voice is gone. You were never temporary. You were the turning point they weren't prepared to honor. And now they walk with the ache of what could have grown, haunted by the realization that the love they once feared was the very thing they've been searching for ever since. Not because it vanished, but because it walked away the moment they stopped believing it was real. There are encounters that bypass understanding and settle straight into the soul. This was one of them. The recognition wasn't surface level, it was cellular. Something ancient stirred before the mind could interfere. Before doubts crept in, before pride took over, before excuses were built, something deeper whispered, "This is different." And that whisper became a weight they couldn't carry. Not because of you, but because of how much truth your presence brought. It wasn't about romance or timing. It was about resonance, being seen without explanation, being felt without performance. That scared them more than anything. They weren't equipped to handle someone who reached beyond their exterior and engaged with the hidden layers. You didn't ask for them to be more. You simply saw what they were hiding. And for someone who built walls for survival, that kind of transparency felt dangerous. So they ran, not from rejection, but from revelation. They might have shut the door, labeled you incorrectly, or erased the visible signs of your connection, but the internal imprint didn't leave. The flashbacks aren't fond memories. They're internal alarms. Each moment remembered isn't romantic, it's accountability. A missed transformation. A door they slammed shut before realizing it led to freedom. What lingers isn't guilt for losing a partner. It's the ache of having denied a moment designed to shift their path. You weren't a detour. You were the invitation. And now they sit in rooms you once would have lit up, trying to quiet a reminder that won't leave. Not because you haunt them, but because the chance to step into something real is rare, and they weren't brave enough to claim it. That pull they still feel? It's not longing. It's the reminder that they looked destiny in the face and turned away. Not everyone can handle clarity, especially when it's quiet. Some energies don't announce themselves with drama, but instead expose everything around them just by existing. You entered spaces not to dominate, but to simply be. And yet, the ripple you left was undeniable. It wasn't volume that unsettled people, it was your stillness. It wasn't critique that unnerved them. It was the way you reflected what they were pretending to be. They were used to being the loudest, the most admired, the most chaste. But then came a presence that didn't play by those rules. You didn't posture. You didn't seek validation. You moved with an ease that said, I already know who I am. And that unbothered energy exposed the performative nature of everyone still trying to prove themselves. Your composure, your boundaries, your refusal to perform, they weren't weapons, but they felt like it to those who lacked the same grounding. You didn't argue, but somehow made them feel like they lost. You didn't boast, yet stole attention from those demanding it. They couldn't pinpoint what made you magnetic, and that's what made them spiral. The discomfort they projected wasn't personal, it was internal. You stood as a silent contrast, and that contrast revealed the gap between who they were and who they claimed to be. They responded with sarcasm, distance, even resentment, not because of anything you did, but because they couldn't pretend around you. The act fell apart in your presence, and now they associate your name not with harm, but with a standard they couldn't meet. You were never their rival. You weren't trying to win. You just arrived fully as yourself. And that was enough to shake everything that was built on illusion. Mirrors don't judge, they reflect. And once someone sees their reflection, they can never unsee it. Some recoveries don't come with explanations. They come with quiet transformations that no one expected. When everything began to unravel, they assumed you would too. They whispered, smirked, withdrew support, or watched from the sidelines waiting for you to collapse. They mistook your silence for surrender and your pain for defeat. But what they didn't realize was that you weren't breaking. You were rebuilding. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. They couldn't comprehend how you kept standing when so much tried to knock you down. Their mindset couldn't grasp how peace can be found in surrender, how strength can be born in stillness. They expected chaos, not clarity. But while they were waiting for a meltdown, you were meeting yourself in the rubble. The same moments that were supposed to bury you became blueprints for your next level. What they feared most wasn't your survival, it was your evolution. Your glow confused them because it wasn't forged through praise or performance. It came from battles they never saw, losses they never counted, and growth they never believed you had the capacity for. They didn't see the nights you had to become your own rescue. Now you navigate with grace they can't mimic, and peace they can't manufacture. And they're left wondering how someone they wrote off is walking with this much authority, without even looking back. Some stories don't end where others drop the pen. They walked away thinking your value came from being in their world. They didn't realize you were the narrative, not the footnote. They exited without warning, convinced your chapter had ended. But instead of closure, they triggered expansion. You didn't need to explain their absence. You became more in it. They assumed their departure would create silence, but it only gave you space to build something new. You weren't waiting at the edge of the last page, they were, expecting you to collapse into regret. They missed the part where you became the version of yourself they secretly feared. Healed, focused, and unreachable. What eats at them now isn't your success. It's the echo of what could have been if they hadn't turned the page too soon. Every time your name comes up, every time your presence is mentioned where they hoped you'd disappear, they feel the crack in their own story. Not because you're flaunting anything, but because your existence is now a reminder of what they chose to abandon. They didn't lose a moment, they lost an entire meaning. And the hardest part? There's no edit that can fix what they erased. You became a sequel they don't have access to, and their regret is the unread sentence that keeps echoing through every silence they once celebrated.